International
News First, face to face with Shalan Benedict.
Politicians promising to lower taxes and keep it that way has almost become as if vampires promising to become vegetarians. Good evening and welcome. This is Face to Face. Joining us this evening for a discussion, of course, on Sri Lanka's economic situation and, of course, also the political situation in the country is Dr. Harsha De Silva, parliamentarian from the Samagijana Balavagia. A very good evening, Doctor, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Dr. Harsha De Silva, now, we've year in and year out, we always hear promises from politicians, and people are now starting to really wake up and see the reality of the situation that Sri Lanka is in right now. Speaking specifically about taxes, which is one of the biggest concerns that the people have because they are paying so much right now. Recently, the SLPP had their party convention, and at the party convention there weren't specific promises given, but at least when you read between the lines, and then the general kind of promise was that we will lower taxes, we will bring it down to a more affordable level. So I couldn't help but wonder as to what's stopping them from doing it right now, because aren't they the ones in power, or is this we usually see this promise coming generally from several opposition parties also, that taxes will be lowered to a certain degree, but what really is possible at this moment when it comes to taxes?
You started out by saying, Sharon, that it's like a vampire promising to become a vegetarian. You actually said it. You know, I mean, people can no longer be fooled. I mean, we've hit not the bottom, but we've hit pretty hard surface going down, right? And we are now side of hanging, right? We need to climb back up, okay? So whether you like it or not, government's revenue has to increase. Sri Lanka has a unique position of being the absolute last in the world in terms of revenue to GDP, right? And I mean,
last in the world.
Last in the world. You know, it is. You know, there are some countries that don't provide information to the UN. Okay. So I don't know, but we are there.
From the ones who provide, we're somewhere around the last.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are at the bottom, right? So I mean, last time we had a reasonably satisfactory revenue to GDP was when Mr. Premadasa was in office. 1993, we had about 20-21% of GDP as revenue. Then 94 came the Chandrika JVP alliance, and they cut taxes, gave concessions, and then from that day on, populist policies got our revenue to GDP down to about 9.5%, 9% or so.
What's the global average like?
So for us, we should be around 20%. Anywhere between, say, I think we can manage at around 18%. Okay? Our neighbors are at those levels. India, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, all these countries, right? And then the Yaparane government tried to change the downward trend. Late Mangala brought in the new income tax law, and then it turned around. People cursed him for it, but it turned around, and he went back to about 11 perhaps %. It was on the way up. Then came Gotabaya Rajapaksa, and then he sort of removed all the taxes, and then we fell to the very bottom, and that caused, as now the Supreme Court determination very clearly says, the bankruptcy. That was a trigger, because we were anyway in a very vulnerable position. That was a trigger, right? So now what has happened is they have to bring back revenue. To bring back revenue, sort of the sacred sectors that were exempt have also now been brought into the tax net. I vociferously protested the tax, 30% tax on exports. Right? Now, except for service exports, every other export is taxed at 30% on the income. But now, recently, we had the VAT. VAT is now applied on the mammoties of the farmer to the fertilizer, everything, right? I mean, it's hardly anything that is not taxed except for rice and a few basic prescription medicines, etc. And so, what has happened is all of us, the 225 lakhs, 22.5 million people have now got to dish out a lot more than what they ever expected to, because the hole that they are in is unimaginably deep and difficult to get out of. Okay,
Dr. Harsha, now when speaking of coming out of this hole, now I read up a bit about South Korea and how they suffered an economic crisis and how people contributed willingly, even by donating their jewelry and their valuable belongings. But at least looking at the situation in the country, in Sri Lanka, what's stopping people from really contributing? Because at the end of the day, people in Sri Lanka are wise, they are literate, and they want Sri Lanka to come out of this rut. But what is really stopping Sri Lankans from helping the country move out?
See, it's like this, a lot of people have misdiagnosed the problem. Like, you have a liquidity problem, meaning, okay, you're on a generally okay trend and suddenly something happens, right? And then you need to manage until we are back on that positive trend, right? So you have a gap, right? So you have to bridge that gap. So that's a liquidity crisis. So you can borrow from some countries, friends or citizens and bridge it. But you're back on that growth path. We have not only a liquidity problem, we have a solvency problem. Our problem is not just a cash flow issue. Our problem is that the whole system is stuck. Our engine is sputtering. Systems, the pistons are not working, right? We are running out of fuel, right? I mean, the efficiency is down. This machine is broken. Right, so you need to now sort of overhaul this entire economic engine, right? That is a lot more complex than getting some citizens or foreigners to pitch in to get through a sort of a period of cash flow issue. So that solution doesn't lie in a simple answer that some people say, look, we could have borrowed some money from India, from China, done something. That's too simplistic, and that's just either they do not understand or they willfully are trying to mislead people.
Dr. Harsha, now the solution that has been pitched, of course, is to increase taxes, increase government revenue. And speaking yesterday, the governor of the central bank, Dr. Nandalal, said that there are only a few ways that he himself knows on how to increase taxes. Either a personal income tax needs to be increased to about 45% if we are to do away with the VAT, or the VAT should be increased, or the tax net should be widened. More people should be paying taxes, because then that will reduce the burden on an individual who has to pay taxes. But speaking on really getting the people to pay taxes, now policies can be formulated, laws can be passed in parliament that will not really push the people to pay taxes. Either people have to come willingly, disclose their assets and their income and pay taxes, or the government needs to enforce this. What is happening on that front?
You see, it's something called the Laffer curve, meaning, so think about it this way. On the vertical axis is total tax revenue brought in by the treasury. On the horizontal axis is the percentage of tax, right? For ease of to make it simple, just say 10, 20, 30. Yeah. What happens is, as the tax rate goes up, the tax revenue also goes up. After a point, it sort of maximizes, and if you continue to increase your tax rate further, tax revenue comes down, right? So that means on the margin you increase the tax rate the tax revenue actually decreases, not increases, right? So you have to really figure out what that inflection point is, right? So where the derivative, first derivative changes in this curve. Now, so the incentive to work and contribute towards the taxes diminishes after a certain point, because you're too much tax. You might as well not work, because there's no point in really.
Or you might as well not disclose.
So that's evasion, right? Now evasion happens all the way from the beginning to the end. Like even if it is 10%, people who are evading, right? But the incentive to evade increases when the rates are high. So while I partially agree with Nandalal, there are other things that we can do. For instance, tax administration. Whichever tax rate, let's say 20%, but if you're not collecting the taxes at 20%, then that's not a problem of the tax rate, that's a problem of
collection.
So what we see is there's huge amount of taxes that are not getting collected, right? Whether it is in the casinos, whether it is in the sugar scam, whether it is in some other scam,
whether it's in the bar license, the taverns,
you name it, right? And you go, go to PETA, right? How many people actually pay taxes? Do they pay import taxes when they bring it in baggage form, or do they pay income tax? Do they declare their revenue? Or look at the tuition classes, actually do they pay the taxes, right? I mean, I can go on, right? Of course, take the professionals, right? Take the lawyers. I'm not saying all lawyers are not paying. I have friends who pay a lot of tax as lawyers, but doctors, how many there are some doctors who actually ask for cash in envelopes to do operations. It happens in this country. Right, so it is a societal thing, right? So if you have the capacity to implement the law, you don't really have to have these high taxes. And I'll tell you, people are saying we don't have enough people in the tax department to collect the taxes, etc. That is a 20th century. We are in the 21st century. Everything is digital. Right, everything has to be connected. You see, recently I had a little debate with the foreign minister in parliament. Now, what we did there was, earlier on the consular division took 6 hours on average to go through paper files to sign the affidavit. We brought it down to less than 10 minutes. How did we do it? By digitizing. Right, so digitizing, whether it is the RAMIS system, right, whether it is linking the customs and the excise and income tax, all those things need to happen. Or whether we bring in blockchain, there are multiple ways in which you can improve the efficiency. Right? So efficiency improvement is at the core of increasing revenue to the treasury without increasing the burden of taxation on the people and on corporates.
But what is stopping the government, Dr. Harsha, from really doing this, really increasing the efficiency? Because we always see this conversation regarding the tax rate and how much, but we all know it's a public secret the taxes are not being collected properly.
Yeah. I mean, there are two things. One is, look, the unwillingness of the officials to do this. I mean, for the longest time, the damn system is broken. How can that be?
The officials are unwilling to do this.
I mean, it's not happening, no. It's not happening, right? I mean, they come, they promise, it won't happen. Right? Why are they not connected? Right? So, I mean, is there some, widespread opposition to removing human beings from engaging with the taxpayer, right? I mean, discretion is not good in this instance. You must take away the discretion, right? let us not have human beings interact between the tax department and the taxpayer, right? Let it run on an automated, when I say automated, you can digitize a lot of these things, right? The second thing is that the corruption that obviously is internalized in this thing. So if you can somehow break through this, we can hopefully one day get through this.
But then this whole issue regarding the lapses in collection of taxes, I think there was once a system where there were several appeals that were preferred in the same institutions, which allowed corporate entities to postpone the payment of taxes 5-6 years, and when they do pay the taxes, it's not really worth what it should be worth. So those systems were fixed. But how long do you think it will take Sri Lanka to really make our tax system efficient enough to, like you said, crawl ourselves out of this crisis?
Well, I mean, there are two sides to this. One is it's a social contract between the government and the taxpayer, right? They must feel that the tax dollars, tax rupees are at work, right? That it is worthwhile paying taxes. Currently, people are disappointed and disgruntled, angry that tax money is being either wasted or robbed, right? So that new social contract has to be entered into. Okay, so that you can't do overnight. That will take time.
Okay.
Right? But what you can do is what I mentioned earlier. Right? Those things are quick fixes that can happen. And
but Dr. Harsha, since you spoke about this whole social contract and the people should feel that their money is not being wasted, it just brings to mind a recent debate that happened on the expenditure heads of during the budget debate, and I was listening to the expenditure heads on the money allocated for former presidents. Now, what really startled me was the fact that there are several former presidents who are now in parliament as parliamentarians, and they are allocated a massive amount, hundreds of millions of rupees in the budget, and they also draw the benefits as a parliamentarian, the vehicles, the security, and all of that. And then, do you see the problem here? It's kind of obvious and blatant.
It is blatant. It's quite disgusting if you ask me, right? First of all, if you're the president and you leave the office of president, stay at home. What the? You're going to come back as an MP? What is this? I mean, how much of greed do you people have? Right? I mean, for what? I mean, you've gone to the topmost. I mean, you've done good things, you have failed in others. That's how life is. Stay at home. Right? I mean, in our administration, I am not willing, right, to allocate these kinds of monies for these people. And also, Gotabaya Rajapaksa ran away. He ran away. So why on earth are we spending a single rupee to look after his whims and fancies? He ran away. Right? And for a man who ran away, we have to dish out our money?
But Dr. Harsha, see, the contention of the people is that now, despite all of this opposition, despite what is being said right now, come a government of the SJB in the near future, let's presume, people are of the opinion that nothing is going to change. At the next budget reading, the expenditure heads will be read out, millions will be allocated, millions will be passed, because there is that unspoken understanding between political parties that we need to take care of each other.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite understandable given sort of what has happened, right? Now, I don't think that we can continue to, be that.
Okay.
And, I cannot, and I'm not willing to promise things that we cannot deliver, right? So I think it's a progressive move towards sort of shedding all these unnecessary expenditures, right? Now, for instance, whether a minister should be given homes, right? There are two things there. One, if a person has a home, a reasonable home in Colombo, should he or she be given another home, right? Or can that be used for official engagements, right? And two, should their kin be looked after? For instance, I recall when Gotabaya Rajapaksa became president, he said no family member should serve on any of the ministerial staff or private staff of ministers. What has happened? Right, and those will have to stop. Right, people don't get elected to look after their families. Right, so I mean things like that. These are ethics. They are values. Right, that you need to bring. Right, so those things will have to happen, and next budget is going to be as difficult as this budget. Right, because it is going to take us time. Remember, Rajapaksa, Gotabaya and others took our country back 9 years. 9 years, right? And now to get back that 9 years and then progress from there is no easy task. So that's why I said the other day, some people are acting and speaking as if they can, create pigeons from handkerchiefs. It does not happen. We got fooled when we were kids, when we went to birthday parties, right? So it is not that simple. And if you really understand the problem, you will realize how complicated the solution is. And I'm telling you because I think I can afford to say this, because I was the first guy in 2020 urged the government, right? Go to the IMF and resolve this before you become bankrupt, crash the currency and have inflation through the roof, right?
Dr. Harsha, you come off as the sound of reason, of course, during these days, given your, blatantly true or your truthfulness.
Yeah.
So, as a member of the SJB, now, your party is campaigning for the presidency, for the general election. What are the realistic promises from among the many promises that the SJB places before the people that you think can be accomplished under an SJB government?
I mean, I think it is more than just an SJB government. It's an ideological shift that we have to make, right? And that is, we can no longer depend on somebody else to help us. We have to help ourselves, right? When people say, I will reduce this, I will give you that, I will not go through the pain and suffering because I have to deal with the external debt holders, etc. I have some homegrown solution. I am not going to say that, right? Let us be honest. I'd rather go home and enjoy my retirement, right, than tell lies to people and get elected, right? So the promise is, we will get you out of this mess, right? We will do that by creating well-paying jobs, not by handouts. We will do that by creating opportunities, right? And that will happen if and only if this country builds bridges to the world. Right, and that we have to open our minds and free the economic engine that is broken because it's bound and gagged, it's chained and bound, right? You cannot run a country this way. The socialist agenda has ruined this country, right? One thing is that we have completely forgotten about the fundamentals of an economy, that is efficiency and productivity, right? And we have gotten used to handouts from the state. So that has to change, right? And to change that is not that difficult, right? If people see you have a government that is honest, the government that is not stealing your money, and a government that is capable and has an ideology and has a team who can work with the rest of the world and are not trying to BS you, I think we can get it done. Right? So the promise is a better future, but it has to take its course. We have to go through some hard times ahead. But having said that, I have shown that you can bring down the pay tax to 24% at the margin and still collect the 100 billion. No one else has thus far pointed out, tabled in Parliament an equation how to do that except for us. We have written a blueprint 1, we have updated to blueprint 2, and I'm working on, and we will release blueprint 3 by February, March. It will give step by step. These are the steps that we will take, right? So if we continued the journey that Mr. Premadasa had, I started out by saying in 1993 we had 20 to 21% of GDP as taxes, revenue, including taxes, right? There was enough money for social security. There was enough money for subsidies for people who need. Janasavya was there, the free uniforms was there, the lunch was there. I mean, but what happened? Neither growth nor social welfare. So so we turned, it was an inflection point in the journey of this country. Right? So what we want to do is to pick up from where he left off after all these years and get back on the road to prosperity. Right? So it is in that context we are talking of what we call a social market economy. So on the one hand we believe in the markets, and I must say this, ours is a synthesis of what I call economic liberalism or economic freedom or economic democracy, meaning that we believe in markets for goods and services. Like, this is different to what the other parties are saying, that they believe in the markets for goods but not for services. I don't have the time to get into that, but that's a fundamental difference between those guys and us.
Definitely, Dr. Harsha.
And the second thing is political liberalism, political freedom. What we mean there is social justice and equity. So it is a synthesis of these two things that we promise the people.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harsha De Silva, parliamentarian from the Samagya Janabalawege, for joining us on our program this evening. Thank you very much to all our viewers out there for tuning in to another episode of Face to Face. Until we meet again, take care and God bless.